The idea behind the show is simply asking guests what they would tell a stranger on a plane if they were sitting next to them and the stranger asked them for advice.
The scenery is passing very fast, but the seer is constant. The one who's seeing is the same.
Let me appreciate you for asking a question that I haven't been asked after 2,500 or so interviews over the years.
Is you have to drop the ego, which is everyone's greatest obstacle.
In 2008, Grant and I had been married for 4 years. I was pregnant with my first child. The economy was collapsing, and we were on the verge of losing everything financially.
Hello, everybody. It's Corey Poirier back with another edition of this brand new show that we have called The Enlightened Passenger. Interesting thing is I say brand new show, and I forget sometimes we're in the podcasting world as well, where things are evergreen. So you could be listening to the show, it could be 5 years old, and I'm saying brand new show. So just know at some point it was a brand new show. So Karie Cassell, so excited to have you here with us today. Karie, where I usually like to start, because we do an intro off the top, because we only have such a short amount of time. I want to dive right into some heavy stuff. And so also this show, it's not my long form show, so I jump in with big questions, just a forewarning. So the big question I want to jump in with right now is legacy. So when I talk about and bring up the word legacy, it's a heavy, big word for a lot of people. What does it mean to you?
It's a great word and something I didn't ponder at any point in my life until I turned 50. And I had contemplated retiring. And then I realized, oh, I think I'm made for more and I'm supposed to do more to leave behind. So funny you say legacy. My interpretation is, in my case of my daughter, where does she see me? What's her memory of me? And I knew that I was doing things sort of slightly different as a mom. And for me, that became writing a book. And that I thought would be one way of twisting all sorts of dimensions of myself. Although it is a how to help heal you type of a book, it still talks about me. So it's a storyline type book. So that's how it was for me to be able to leave for my daughter. But now I see it's building to more than that. It's a company based on wellness, and that she's also in wellness that now she can take on and so forth. And I think you understand more about that too.
100%. Well, and on that note, I mean, I'm this day and age, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. Yeah. And so even legacy has changed, obviously, to me now versus what it meant whenever I was growing up. When I was growing up, legacy could have been as simple as, I want to do something really cool that people will talk about. Like, I feel like, when you're a kid and you want to be a rock star, there's a certain element of that, of legacy, right? Like you see these, like the Rolling Stones, yes. It's like fun. It's funny because I think of some bands were like, I can't believe we still remember the Beatles, and we're still like, their songs are still charting and stuff. But then, and somebody said, well, same with the Rolling Stones. I mean, yeah, but the Rolling Stones are still doing it. Like they haven't stopped yet. But either way, I mean, yes. Rolling Stones in theory, I mean, the Beatles for sure have had a legacy. What is it? Close to 50 years now since they stopped playing. And so when you're a kid, you look at it and say, oh my God, that's my favorite band. And everybody knows them. And I think legacy is this almost superficial thing when you're younger. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that's how it feels to me now. But once you have children or things change, like big moments, like you start a business or whatever that looks like, you get a new job, I think legacy takes on a new meaning. And so for me, to your point, yeah, it's totally different now. My legacy now is I want to, it might not last after my body is gone, but I want to create ripples for more and more people so that they have an impact on the world. And that somehow has as Steve Jobs would say, makes a dent in the universe. But part of that is I want to do it so that my kids can see that, so they'll want to do that and help others and serve and support and all that kind of stuff. So now part of my legacy is I want them to witness me doing it. So yes, it changed dramatically.
And also as big to me is that there's a message, a pioneer of a message. And that could, it doesn't have to be a big book or a building or a bricks and mortar type scenario, but for me, it's as adequate to say, oh yeah, she left a mark. She left a message.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, and I heard Grant Cardone in an interview one time with Darren Hardy, who was the publisher of Success Magazine at the time. And Darren asked him, what does legacy mean to you? And I'll never forget. It's really what I guess it means to all of us, but just for whatever reason, it struck me that day and it never left, is he said, I just want to do something that survives longer than my physical body does. And but now, but I love that. And I actually brought it up to his wife in an interview for this series, in fact. But I also will go a step further and say, at the same time, maybe it doesn't need to be 400 years longer like Shakespeare. Like maybe the longer can just be because you had a ripple on people that continued. I mean, I don't mean to go on a tangent because I want to circle back to you, but I'll say, I just brought this up the other day and my girlfriend said, oh, I never thought of it like that. And the truth is I hadn't until I said it either. But I thought I was talking about how this one person we knew was in 2 car accidents where everybody else passed away except for them. And so you go around that idea of like, why were they kept here? What was their purpose? And this person, again, I don't want to give too much away. I don't want the person to figure out I'm talking about them or what have you, but this person isn't necessarily doing what maybe most people would think they would do to kind of, let's say, go, I'm here for a reason type thing. And I'm trying to say this in the nicest way. Like, it's just like, for me, I would be like, I need to do more because I was saved for some reason. And this person seems to not care about any of that. And maybe just kind of like their life is, they're not really seeking for anything. And so I wondered that one time, like, and she said to me, well, it makes you wonder what they were saved for. And then I said, well, how do we know it's them? Maybe it's their grandkids. Maybe their grandkid is going to save a life, 50 years from now of somebody else who's going to help world peace finally exist. Like, in other words, it doesn't necessarily have to be that person. We don't have to know where the line was. Yeah. And so, but naturally we think, oh, well, they were saved, they have a purpose. And we hear that a lot, right? 2 people say, I got in an accident and then I saved. And so I realized that, I'm here for a reason. I got to do big things. Maybe that's true. But then I started thinking, what about those people that don't? Well, maybe it's not even them. Maybe maybe it's somebody that they help. Maybe they give somebody money that lifts them back up on their feet, that was on the side of the street, and we never know. So anyway, just to that point, I think legacy is what it means to us, and that's what matters. It doesn't have to be this grandiose big thing.
Yeah. Before you hit the pillow for the last time, have you completed everything that could be it?
100%. I love it. So, circling around, and I'm going to ask, I decided that I'm going to ask you a couple of similar questions to that big, heavy question. Another one is success. And this one here, sometimes I don't like asking it because I know so many people get asked this all the time. How do you define success? But I love the fact that there's always seems to be different answers to this one question. So how do you personally, Karie, define success? Like, what does it mean to you to say I'm successful?
That's another, moving target. Once upon a time, it would have maybe been a currency in terms of money, but now I see currency from how my daughter reciprocates, how I see that she's as a young adult, and how the being able to have some time in the morning. I love mornings and the sunrises with just me and my spiritual practice. And I actually, this morning, it was a beautiful sunrise, and I was able to do that and felt the success of that I'm able to have a full spectrum sort of life with my health, my relationships. And so it has been redefined for me personally to have that entrepreneur success is part of that, because I do get to have that flexibility of defining my own hours. That, to me. Now, once it was money for sure, and it was X number of copies of a book sold, and it was being a bestseller and all these things. But once I hit the bestseller, to be honest with you, I kind of looked around and went, okay, now what? So it kept, and it still keeps redefining. I don't think that answers it really, really laser beamed like you might like.
No, there's no wrong answers.
I think success is just having the desire to keep growing and the means to provide that from all angles, energy, finances, and relationships to share it with. So to me, there's 4 areas in life: health, wealth, career, and your sort of spiritual way of being. And if those are all fulfilled, that is success to me.
So I love that. And I love what you said about the book thing, because I've talked about this in recent years, how I've discovered there's an influencer thing that influencers don't share. There's a thing that I see influencers tell me personally or privately, or I see them struggle with, but nobody ever talks about it, which is this whole idea of being too focused on the destination, thinking it's going to give you everything, only to discover it doesn't. And then instead of going, okay, maybe I need to explore this, I'll just find another destination that destination wasn't big enough. And so what I'm getting at is that I discovered it myself personally with a book. That's what made me think of this. Is my first book. When I wrote it, I put heart and soul into it 4 years. And honestly, I enjoyed the journey, but not like I could have. Like I didn't really sit in the moments. And so I was like, okay, but when the book's out, when I make bestseller and all this stuff. And finally, I held it in my hand. This is, I guess, another one of my books. And I held it in my hand. I showed this on the training I did earlier. So I held the book in my hand and I was literally what you said. And I kind of turfed it to the side and went, next. It didn't mean, like, it didn't have any of the what I thought it was going to mean to me feeling. And so I really had to start going inward and realizing I had to enjoy the journey. I have to enjoy the keystrokes, typing, the sitting across from a lake while I'm getting the inspiration to write and all that stuff that happened. And then the destination that I thought was a destination of holding the book is just one more part of the journey. But honestly, truly, Karie, I still don't, getting the book in my hand, I still don't enjoy that as much as I thought I would. All the other things I enjoy more. I enjoy writing it more than actually being a bestseller. But
yeah.
The one good thing is we're already bestsellers now, so we don't lose the title. But it's just, I truly thought it was going to feel different, like you did, than it did. And I think we'd be surprised how many big name influencers struggle with that, like the push to always get to that next mountain because the previous mountain didn't feel fulfilling.
Yeah, such a good point. I mean, I think you also have that book about the why, and to go back to that and go, okay, what was the real why? And remember, my real why was to hit stages more, to be able to spread the message more and to have courses. But the book consumed a lot of the time and money and energy and all that the journey, yes, as you say, I wish I would have just relaxed in that more, because I think you spoke about this too, that you sort of channel information. And what a great experience that is. I did not have writer's block because this channeling thing would occur. And I really loved that. So that is the journey. And the bestseller part didn't provide that, but little did I know. And would be advice to other people perhaps is to have that, what looks next, what past the bestseller, what is the next why, and have that, pardon the pun, in the books as part of the journey. I think that's so crucial, because I hadn't done that enough and kind of fell into this place of, oh gosh, if that's all there is to it, I should have just retired. So I visited some of that, but I'm back into the, I see my why now.
So yes, I love that. And for me, the channeling thing, it's so weird because growing up, I never viewed myself as, I don't know the best way to say it, but I didn't view myself as like an artistic writer. Like I didn't feel I had whatever that was. And then I started writing music when I was 12. And what was really weird about it when I started was the song. Like I wrote the song. I still know the song. I actually was on one of my albums. Like it was a coherent enough song and decent enough song that I put it on an album and it got released on radio. And I wrote it in a sitting at 12. And I didn't understand the chords. They weren't actual real chords like they are, but they were chords I wouldn't have known at the time. And at the same time, the words, I never once sat down and said, what rhymes with orange? Everything came out perfectly for the song. And it was a complete song. And I'm like, how did that happen? I don't remember doing that. But for years, to be honest, Karie, I just fought it and thought, okay, I got this strike of inspiration at that moment. I really did write it, but I didn't feel like it was or whatever. But then as I continue writing songs throughout the years, all the songs that I've written that have been the songs when I play them live, people resonate with, or one song I had that people would request, they're all the songs that I wrote like that, where I didn't sit down and say, what rhymes with this? I've written the other way, what rhymes with, and had some songs that were okay, but never the experience of channeling. Interestingly, when I started writing books, the exact same thing happened. And the book I'm working on now, which by the way was the inspiration for this show, The Enlightened Passenger, that book is a fictional parable. And I knew I wanted two people to be on a plane. I actually knew what I want the ending to be. It's a twist ending, and I won't share it here. I'll tell you privately, but not on here, because when we release the book, it's like it's like the Sixth Sense ending. It's a twist ending. And but I knew the ending, and I knew who I wanted the character. I didn't even know what the characters I want them to be. I just knew I wanted one to be a young, cocky salesperson type person or business person, and one to be like a Wayne Dyer type sage. And I want them on a plane. That's all I knew. And I sat down and started typing at a cottage, in fact, where I did it in Prince Edward Island. I sat at a cottage and I typed, and my kids were running around. Like it wasn't even the most inspirational place to write it. But bottom line is those characters came to life. I feel like they're my friends. Like the whole book was channeled, and I never once sat and said, what should I write here? And
it was like your right brain. Yeah, your right brain was completely firing, right?
Yeah, and I'm scared. Like, I don't want to put much thought to it because that's when the stuff happens. But I'm scared someday am I going to lose that? Like that, I don't know what it is because I hear people say writer's block, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. As long as I get started writing, it doesn't stop flowing. But I don't want to jinx myself.
I
So.
hear you. Mine is more so, okay, out of the bazillion ideas and thoughts, which ones do I discern from, and the editing down so that it's not a 400-page book like the first one. So I hear you.
Yeah,
It's a
well,
great-
I have a good sounding board. My girlfriend really tells me her honest opinion when I will say, "What about this idea?" And I had an idea. I can't remember what it was. It was about life lessons, and it was like people in. I can't remember the whole gist, but it was people in prisons, and it was like almost Life of Pi, but it was people in prisons.
Oh yeah.
But there was like this tiger that somehow got loose in the prison. Like it couldn't even been like the guard
Oh,
let him
dear.
loose because he didn't like the prisoners or whatever. And so these people were stuck in their prison and couldn't eat and whatever for like 3 days. And it was like this, they had this awakening. And I told her all the story, and she's like, that seems like the tiger part of it. Like I said, the tiger actually attacks one of them and stuff. She's like, I don't know, that one seems too out there. But that was like an example. And I don't think it was meant for the world, maybe, or at least my world. But that's an example. I went to her with it, and she was blunt about it. Whereas some people will be like, "Yeah, what do I get to lose? Write that book."
And or it's one of those, in a 3-year plan, it belongs at this time frame. Maybe don't park it just yet. Just keep it in idle somewhere.
100%. Love it. So let's focus more on you. I've been doing a lot of talking about me this time. So, so let's switch. I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about books, I want to ask you 2 questions together, and then I want to ask you our big main question we like to ask everybody. 2 questions together is around books and whether it's podcasts, but or videos or what have you. But what's your favorite book? And if you listen to podcasts or watch speakers or whatever, do you have a favorite in that area as well? Like a favorite podcast you listen to or a favorite influencer? I'm just curious, what's your favorite and why, essentially?
Oh gosh. There are so many books. I'll tell you, I had pivotal ones like Wayne Dyer, definitely, and Jerry Zukov. I read A Course in Miracles twice. I tell you that. I mean, that's thick and heavy, and I'll say that that's a favorite in the way that it really deepened my thinking. That's probably not one that I was going to run to and fly off the shelves with, but it was a huge one and then a huge influencer. But Christine Ponder wrote a book about the prosperity of profits. And that's not the exact title, so I'll have to come back to that. And she spoke about the Course in Miracles, which led me there in the first place. So that was a game changer in the way that I manifested or seen money. And I would say, I didn't even think that would come up, actually, but your question makes me think about that. Yeah, it probably starts with her. I'm about 20 years old, roughly, at that point.
Wow. I love it. And, myself, I've shared many times that my first book was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I know how that book came to me. My mother bought it at a flea market for $0.25. And I was I don't know why. She doesn't remember why she did. I just said to her to do it. And I'd never read a full book. So there's no reason. Why would you buy a business book who's never read a full book? And it's not really business, it's life, but you know what I mean? That style of book. Or a personal development book. And she put it in my bag when I was going off on a retreat for a company I was working for. And I was there and I was stuck in this cottage with 2 people that were very negative. And I'm like, I got to find something to do so that they understand why I'm not talking to them. So I said, I have this book here. Like I discovered it in my bag. I'm like, I have this book that I brought with me. And I'm like, my head going, where'd this book come from? Talked to my mom later. She bought it for $0.25. I read the first page. Boom. I was hooked. And that book changed my life. So I remember with my mom with that one, but I've tried recently to remember how I discovered Think and Grow Rich, because that was the second book. And I'm like, how did I go from never reading to 2 heavy books like that? And so I know the Think and Grow Rich, but I don't know how to Win Friends, but I don't know how I discovered it. So it's pretty cool that you remember how you discovered Course in Miracles.
Well, yes. But funny enough, because you share this as well, that you weren't somebody that read books, neither was I. I was 20-ish by the time I actually read a book that you didn't have to read through school. And even if I had to read it in school, I tried to find another way. It was, where's the Coles Notes? Where's the movie? Academics was not my place of being, put it that way.
You're kind of speaking my language.
I felt that. Like,
I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about it, but I said that I only read 3 books ever, even though I always say How to Win Friends was my first. I read 3 books before that, but the reason I don't consider them reading them is because I only finished a chapter or half a chapter. And I always tell people they were the 3, and I say, you know what, you know why I read them: To Kill a Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies, and Death of a Salesman. And I talked about Cole's Notes, like literally everything you're saying. But I often tell people the 4th book I attempted to read was Cujo. And I only got a chapter in, and it wasn't because I was scared. It was because it didn't pull me in. And I always say the movie scared the bejesus out of me, but the book didn't pull me in. And so even though I always say the first book I read, I mean the first book I read cover to cover. But similar type thing to you, I struggled with all that.
Just wasn't. And then when I did, I went into this imaginary world, or whatever you want to call that. And oh, that's what they're talking about. So then I became a reader after the fact. So it was a late bloomer. And that I became a writer, that was just, are you kidding me? I dodged English as much as possible in my academic years, but nonetheless, I wish I had paid attention to English when it came to the editing, put it that way.
Well, that's amazing. Well, and I'm the same, by the way. What's funny is that I ended up publishing a newspaper before I ever read a full book. But at the same time, when I go back and look at those early editions, not good. I'm like, it was like a 20-year-old, but it looked like it was a craft project that a 14-year-old did. But we had advertisers. It was a business. We ran it. But anyway, to your point, I wish I would have focused a little more on school, grammar and English. But moving down that path, I wanted to ask you I said one main question, but I'm going to ask you both these are the finished questions. Both of them are questions I like to ask guests. Since I've never asked you this one before, the first one to lead in is the time machine question. Simply this, Karie: if you could jump into a time machine, go back and talk to a younger version of yourself, give her some life advice based on what you've learned in the years since, what do you think you might tell her?
I've actually caught myself doing that. So this is great. The other day I went for a walk and literally was speaking to the younger version of myself when I was just becoming a dietitian. Sorry, I was in university, so I hadn't become a dietitian yet. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be so great. I can't wait. But then there'd be worry, will I be hired? And there was all this mixed feeling of this passion I wanted to do so badly, and thought, oh, am I going to just be a dime a dozen, and all those thoughts. And I literally had to stop my walk and look at myself and say, hey girl, don't worry about it. It's just passion will always lead. It'll take you where you need to go, and you'll find breadcrumbs along the way, and it'll actually be better than you thought it would be. And I mean, that became the truth. But to the message to anybody else, passion will fuel the way. So find your passion. And I know that sounds cliche almost, but it's the truth. Just another example of it. It keeps you fueled, but also it seeds the way.
So you may have in some ways answered the second question, which is the passenger question, but it's the one that inspired, like I say, this entire show. It's simply this: if you were sitting on a plane next to a stranger, they lean over and say, hey, I need some life advice. What do you got? What do you think you might tell the stranger on a plane? And of course, the difference here is it's not advice for younger Karie. It's advice for somebody you never met before.
Often people will say, well, what do you do? And well, I mean, I'm a life coach and a dietitian. I started off as a dietitian long before I became a dietitian. And, the word dietitian or the word diet has so many connotations, right? Like you have one, I have, and mixed messages. And I love that they think I'm going to pull out the calculator and start calculating their carbohydrates or something. But at the end of the day, I love to tell people that the true meaning of the word diet comes from the Greek word dieta, which means a way of life. And I want people to know that Christmas is a way of life. We experience highs and lows, loss of someone, and also the celebrations of things as a way of life. And it's how to appreciate food from a completely different viewpoint, and not to have it with guilt, to have it with love. So my messaging is quite different than the average, I would say. And I'm a dietitian on a mission, putting back the true meaning of the word diet as the way of life.
So I love that, just that there. I'm a dietitian on a mission. That's like so pleasing the way that sounds. A dietitian.
Good.
Very cool. So I love that tagline, and I love that message as well. And so I said that was the last question. Of course, I'd be remiss not to add in, this is the unofficial question, is of course, how can we learn more? So if people want to learn more about the work you're doing, how they can join your mission, whether that means you're helping them directly or they're a part of your mission, whatever that looks like, is there a hub or is there a place you would send them?
Generally speaking, I've been saying just Google anything to do with the Domino diet and you'll find me. So yes, there's websites, and I do have another business named Nutrition by Karie, but honestly, the easiest to remember is the Domino diet. You'll find me by email, by website, by contact number. And I do welcome all kinds of, I actually want to help other dietitians find the missing pieces that I discovered were missing for me when I had a bit of a health issue. So I welcome all walks of life in that sense to help in the teaching of them become teachers of nutrition, or just them themselves having to navigate a health issue.
So amazing. Well, and I'll say we have so many synergies, like when you were talking about the reading thing and then the Domino thing, of course, the book. I have a talk that I deliver often called The Domino Effect. And it's just really trippy. And that, I mean, when you hear that, you wonder, is that like, I haven't written a book about it or anything, but you wonder what that's about. But it's actually not what anybody would probably normally think. It's actually about me talking about when building an influence, be it building yourself in the influence space or the expert space. It's basically, people always ask me, how did you do it? And I always say it started with pushing down the biggest domino. And then that knocks down the next one, and that knocks down the next one. So the domino effect is really a way for me to say that if you want to build a lifelong career as an expert and start to be considered the go-to person in your field, it starts with pushing the biggest domino down, which isn't easy. But then it'll push the next one, which is still not super easy, but eventually it gets so much easier. And the example I would give to that is if you've interviewed insert name here, then by the time you go to the 50th person, you can now say, I've interviewed these 49 people, and they go, oh, well, if they've interviewed all them, I can trust them. You know, like I can see those interviews and okay, now I'm in now. But when you go to the first one and they're like, oh, this is your first interview ever and you want to interview so-and-so?
Right.
No, usually. But once you have enough, then people say, well, how do you do this? Well, it's so much easier now because I can say, here's my history. But it started by pushing down a big domino. My big domino when I started was Jack Canfield, trying to get Jack Canfield on for a podcast interview for a show that we hadn't even launched yet. And we did it, and then I was able to go to Mark Victor Hansen and say, hey, we've had Jack on, you know, and my point is that was the domino. So just to give some context, we both have a domino thing.
That's amazing.
Our teaching. We both didn't read a book until our 20s. So many synergies. So very cool.
And it does start with the first domino with what I call the domino diet as well. So absolutely.
Well, that's my thing I'm going to do. I'm going to grab the book myself. Before I leave the office today, I'm going to grab a copy of the book and I'm going to dive in. I'm going to make sure my girlfriend and I check it out together. So Karie Cassell, this has been an absolute pleasure. I so appreciate you. Thank you. With your permission, I'll call it a to be continued.
Oh, awesome. And I welcome returning. Thank you so much, Corey.
Very cool. Thank you, everybody. Till next time, I'm Corey Poirier. We'll be back very soon.
Bye for now.